Welcome to Deep Dives, where we dive beneath the surface of news to better provide historic and situational context, as well as assess challenges and opportunities that may arise. This is all approached from different political perspectives, each with historical context. Please enjoy this internet radio podcast while you continue with other tasks. Now, on to the podcast.
You know, it seems like everyone's saying that the global economy is about to totally crash and burn.
Yeah, lots of doom and gloom out there.
Well, you know, a bunch of you listeners sent in research about this, and let me tell you, it's way more interesting than just good or bad.
It's definitely more nuanced than that.
It really is.
The report you guys sent, Global Economic Outlook in early 2025, it paints a really fascinating picture.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? They're calling it a patchwork recovery, which honestly kind of makes me think of like, I don't know, some sort of quilt or arts and crafts projects.
Right.
So what does that actually mean when we're talking about the economy?
Well, it means that basically there's no one single story, you know?
Okay.
Some regions are doing really well, like really surging ahead, and others they're lagging behind.
Yeah.
And it creates this this uneven, fragmented pattern of growth.
Okay, so it's not necessarily the total economic collapse that everyone seems to be predicting.
Not exactly, no. The report actually predicts global GDP growth between 2% and 3% in 2025.
Okay.
Which, you know, it's modest growth for sure.
Yeah.
But it's definitely better than the downturn that a lot of folks were anticipating.
Right, yeah, it's at least something,
Yep.
right? So what's causing this uneven recovery? The report mentions like lingering pandemic effects and what else? Oh, yeah, those crazy energy prices and supply chain issues, right?
Yep, those are all definitely huge factors.
Yeah.
But you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
It's how differently those factors have impacted various regions. You know, for example, Southeast Asia has actually kind of emerged as a winner from all of this disruption.
Really?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable.
So how so? Like, how did they come out on top?
Well, you remember back in 23
Oh, yeah.
when those supply chain disruptions were like totally crippling businesses, you know, worldwide.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Well, Southeast Asia saw that as an opportunity.
Okay.
And they started diversifying their manufacturing. You know, they moved away from relying on single source production.
Smart.
Yeah, and now they're actually key players in multiple industries, which has, you know, in a way, it's made global trade more resilient, I guess you could say.
So they turned a crisis into an advantage.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
It is.
But I mean, shipping costs are still sky high, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So how are they making it work?
Well, it's kind of a combination of things.
Okay.
You know, they've invested a lot in infrastructure.
Okay.
They've streamlined their logistics, and they've formed some pretty strategic partnerships with countries that are, you know, they're also looking to diversify their own supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, you know, a lot of companies, they're willing to pay a little bit more because they value the stability and the reduced risk that Southeast Asia now offers.
So it's like they've, I don't know, kind of rewritten the rules of the game.
You could say that, yeah, they're definitely shaking things up, you know, in a good way, fostering more competition, driving innovation.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we've got this patchwork recovery going on. Southeast Asia's like surprisingly doing pretty well.
They are, yeah.
But what about energy and inflation? I mean, those have been pretty huge concerns lately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the report definitely offers some insights there, too.
Okay.
On the energy front, we are seeing signs of stabilization.
Okay.
You know, that increased natural gas production in the U.S. and the new agreements between oil-producing countries.
Yeah.
That's helped to ease those price spikes that we were seeing earlier this year and last year.
So that's good news, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a positive development.
So does that mean we're out of the woods? Like we're in the clear?
Well, not entirely, no.
Okay.
The report, you know, it acknowledges that stabilized energy prices are good, but it also highlights, you know, a challenge that's still there.
Okay, and what's that?
Inflation.
Ah, yeah, I was going to ask about that because I feel like everyone's still feeling the pinch, even though energy prices had, you know, calmed down a little bit.
Absolutely. And the report projects, global inflation to average around 5% in 2025.
Okay.
And this is where it gets tricky for policymakers.
Why is that? I mean, 5%, isn't that like better than what we've been dealing with?
It is an improvement, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still high enough that it erodes purchasing power and it makes economic planning really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So the challenge for policymakers is how do you control inflation without causing a recession?
Right.
It's a really delicate balancing act.
Yeah, I bet. So what are they doing about it? I mean, I keep hearing all this talk about interest rates and government spending, and
Yeah.
I don't know, it all just seems really complicated.
Yeah, no, it is really complicated.
Yeah.
Central banks, all around the world, they're trying to figure out, like, how aggressively do we raise interest rates?
Right.
Do we prioritize, curbing inflation, even if it risks, causing the economy to slow down? Or do we try to strike a balance between stable prices and keeping the economy growing?
Man, that's a tough call.
It is, yeah.
It's like no matter what they do, somebody's going to be unhappy.
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, it's a high stakes game with potential consequences that could really impact the entire global economy.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So we've got this global picture, some bright spots,
Right.
definitely some serious challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm curious how this is actually playing out in different regions,
Yeah.
like on the ground.
Yeah.
The report digs into like specific regions, right?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It examines how this patchwork recovery is impacting, various parts of the world.
Okay.
And there are some really fascinating contrasts that emerge.
Oh, okay. I'm all ears.
Yeah.
Let's start with Europe. What's happening over there?
Europe's actually doing pretty well.
Really?
Yeah, consumer confidence is up.
Oh.
And, it's being driven by investments in clean technologies and these cross-border digital services.
So they're really like looking towards the future, kind of positioning themselves for the long game.
Exactly, yeah. Focusing on innovation and sustainability.
Makes sense, given their history with climate change and wanting energy independence and all of that.
Right, exactly.
What about China? I know they've been like dealing with some economic issues lately.
Yeah, they have, but
Yeah.
they're bouncing back. Yeah, the report actually highlights China's recovery.
Okay.
And it's being fueled by a few things, a surge in consumer spending,
Okay.
and also a new trade deal with Southeast Asia.
So they're benefiting from those stable supply chains that we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So that's kind of creating like a ripple effect, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could say that.
Southeast Asia's success kind of leads to more opportunities for others.
It's creating a more interconnected economic landscape for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
What about the U.S.? Where do we fit into all this patchwork thing?
Well, the U.S. is it's a bit of a mixed bag, honestly. The report points to strong job growth in tech
Okay.
and green energy.
Good.
Yeah, but it also expresses some concerns about slowing manufacturing.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that.
Yeah,
It seems like automation is it's a double-edged sword, right?
it is. Yeah,
Like it boosts efficiency, but then it also, it displaces workers.
absolutely, and it's a complex issue. Like, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
The report kind of suggests that the U.S. is going to need to focus on retraining and upskilling its workforce,
Okay.
to adapt to all this technological change that's happening.
So investing in education and skills development is going to be super important for staying competitive, right?
I think so, yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, the jobs of the future are going to require, very different skills than the jobs of the past.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about China. We talked about the U.S.
Right.
What about the Middle East? Are they still just, pumping oil? Is that all they're doing?
Actually, the report highlights some pretty surprising developments in the Middle East.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're trying to move away from their dependence on oil,
Wow.
which is a big shift. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
And they're investing a lot of money in solar and hydrogen projects.
I mean, that's ambitious, right?
It is.
Moving away from oil is like way easier said than done.
It is a long-term strategy, yeah.
Yeah.
And the report acknowledges that, they're facing a lot of challenges, but countries like Saudi Arabia
Okay.
and the UAE, they seem pretty determined to diversify their economies
Okay.
and position themselves as these global investment hubs.
I mean, it's ambitious.
It is, yeah.
But I guess everyone's realizing that, relying on just one single resource is kind of risky these days.
Right, especially in today's world.
Things are changing so fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Things are volatile.
So, okay, so we've got this patchwork of economies, each one facing like their own unique set of challenges and opportunities. How does this economic stuff, how does it actually translate into like political viewpoints?
That's a great question.
Because the report also goes into like the political side of things.
It does, yeah. And as you can probably imagine, with such a diverse range of economic realities, there are some pretty different political perspectives on how to move forward.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was really interested in.
Yeah.
Let's get into that.
Okay.
So the report focuses on 5 main groups.
Right.
Liberal, progressive, independent, right-wing, and Christian right.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, and each of these groups is looking at the current economic situation through their own lens, right, leading to like very different policy proposals.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with liberals.
Okay.
How are they viewing, what's happening in the economy right now?
Well, generally, liberals tend to see the need for more global cooperation and interdependence, to address economic challenges.
Really?
And they tend to favor increased social spending, to protect vulnerable communities from the effects of inflation.
Okay, so things like strengthening the social safety net.
Right, exactly.
Expanding access to healthcare and education.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Things
right.
like that.
Yeah.
And they're also, big supporters of investing in green technologies and infrastructure. They see that as a way to stimulate job growth while also, addressing climate change.
Yeah.
So they're pushing for things like carbon taxes, to incentivize businesses to transition to cleaner energy sources.
So I guess you could say it's kind of like a more interventionist approach, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
To try to like guide the economy towards a more sustainable future.
Right. They believe that government has a role to play in shaping the economy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So now progressives, they share some common ground with liberals, but they often push for like even more radical reforms, right?
They do, yeah.
In what way? Like how are they different?
Well, progressives tend to be, more critical of the way the current economic system works. They see it as inherently unequal.
Okay.
And so they're really advocating for policies that, aim to redistribute wealth more aggressively.
Okay.
So things like, higher taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations and, stronger regulations on financial markets.
So they're calling for like a more fundamental restructuring of the economic system.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, they believe that those measures are necessary to prevent future crises and to create a more just and equitable society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, independents, I'm guessing they're a little less ideologically driven.
Yeah, generally speaking, they are. They tend to be, more pragmatic.
Okay.
And they favor solutions that are kind of seen as moderate and achievable.
Okay, so they're kind of like the bridge builders, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find that common ground.
Exactly.
And those practical solutions that can kind of like bridge that partisan divide.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They might support things like balanced budgets, targeted stimulus measures, and infrastructure projects, things that promise both short-term benefits and long-term stability.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the right wing.
Okay.
How are they framing the current economic situation?
Well, right-wing groups, they tend to emphasize fiscal responsibility and limited government intervention in the economy.
Okay.
So they often warn against large deficits.
Okay.
Arguing that they fuel inflation and they stifle economic growth.
Okay, so they're pushing for like a smaller government role in the economy?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. They're wary of too much regulation, believing that it burdens businesses and makes it harder to create jobs.
Okay.
And they tend to favor policies that promote free markets and individual initiative as the drivers of economic prosperity.
Okay, so they're kind of advocating for a more laissez-faire approach.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, and then what about the Christian right?
Right.
How do their views like align with or differ from the right wing's perspective on the economy?
Well, they often share the right wing's emphasis on fiscal responsibility and limited government, but they also they bring this distinct faith-based perspective to the table.
Okay.
They really emphasize moral stewardship of resources,
Right.
and they often advocate for charitable outreach and faith-based welfare programs.
So they're kind of weaving their social values into their economic policy proposal.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
They might also support policies that that promote traditional family structures,
Okay.
like family first tax incentives, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we've got this whole spectrum of political opinions.
Right.
Each one with like its own take on the economic situation and its own set of solutions.
Exactly.
It's like everyone's looking at the same puzzle,
Yeah.
but they're seeing like a totally different picture.
I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating reflection of how closely connected economics and politics really are.
Yeah, for sure.
And it raises this question of how these political divisions, how are they going to play out as countries are trying to, navigate this complex economic landscape that we're all in.
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is.
How do we even like begin to find common ground
Right.
when there's so much disagreement about the way forward?
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
Does the report offer any insight into like how these political dynamics might affect policy decisions?
It does, yeah. And this is actually where a historical perspective can be really helpful.
Okay.
Think back to the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, that was a real turning point for the global economy.
It was a huge shock to the system.
Yeah.
And after 2008, we saw this surge in populist movements all around the world. People were angry about the economic turmoil, and they felt like the system had failed them.
Yeah, they wanted change.
Right. They wanted someone to blame.
Somebody to be held accountable.
Exactly. And the report suggests that, we might see a similar pattern.
Okay.
If inflation continues to be a problem, if it keeps eating away at people's purchasing power, and if inequality keeps growing, it's possible that history could repeat itself.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. I mean, wouldn't policymakers have learned from the mistakes of the past?
Well, you would hope so.
Right.
You would think so. But there's always political pressure.
Yeah.
And the current economic situation it's so complex.
It is, yeah.
It's really hard to say how things are going to unfold.
Okay.
And the report actually cites some pretty interesting data to support its concerns.
Right.
There was a World Bank survey in 2024, and it found that 60% of people globally are critical of economic inequality.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It is.
So that's a lot of people who are, feeling like the system's not working for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so how could this like play out politically?
Well, the report predicts that if these trends continue, if inflation stays high, if inequality keeps rising, liberals and progressives, they're probably going to intensify their calls for, stronger social safety nets and more aggressive climate-focused economic policies.
Okay, so things like universal basic income,
Right.
expanded healthcare, more investments in renewable energy, like that.
Exactly, yeah, things like that. And then those arguments are probably going to gain more and more traction if people keep struggling with, the high cost of living and feeling like the government isn't doing enough to help them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Right.
What about independents? How are they expected to react in this scenario?
Well, the report suggests that independents are probably gonna, they're gonna stick to that more pragmatic approach.
Okay.
They're going to be looking for middle ground solutions that offer, real tangible benefits to a wide range of people.
So they'll be the swing vote then.
Yeah, pretty much. They could
Right.
go either way, depending on, what policies seem most likely to actually deliver results.
So they're really the key then
Yeah.
to either building consensus
Right.
or just like creating more gridlock.
Exactly. Their support's going to be crucial
Right.
for passing any meaningful legislation.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. What about the right wing
Right.
and the Christian
Right.
right?
Well, the report predicts that those groups are probably they're probably gonna double down
Okay.
on their calls for, fiscal restraint, deregulation,
Yeah.
and protectionist trade policies.
Okay, so a more like inward-looking approach,
Yeah, I think you could say that.
focused on national interests and traditional values.
Right. They're going to argue that, the best way to deal with economic challenges is to shrink the government,
Okay.
cut taxes, and really focus on promoting domestic industries.
Okay.
And they'll frame their policies as a way to protect jobs, reduce the national debt, and restore economic strength.
Okay. So we've got all these different visions of how to move forward.
Yeah.
Each one rooted in different values, different priorities. I mean, it sounds like things could get pretty heated.
Yeah, they definitely could.
Yeah.
The report suggests that, these competing narratives are probably going to lead to more political debates and potentially, more gridlock, especially in countries where the political system is already really divided.
Man, that's concerning.
It is.
It seems like finding any kind of solution is going to require compromise and a willingness to actually see things from other people's perspectives.
It's tough though, right?
It's really tough, and with so much at stake, I'm not sure how realistic that is.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But, the report does offer a little bit of hope, I guess.
Sure.
It highlights how important it is to keep talking to each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
But build coalitions and to try to find common ground,
Yeah.
even when we disagree.
So there's still room for optimism.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
The report emphasizes that even with all this political division, there are still opportunities for people to work together.
Okay.
Especially at the local and regional level.
Okay. So while, national politics might be stuck in gridlock,
Right.
communities and businesses can still take action and find solutions that work for them.
Exactly. The report actually points to examples
Okay.
of cities and regions around the world that are doing some really innovative things
Okay.
when it comes to economic development,
Okay.
job creation, sustainability.
Right.
And they're doing all this regardless of what's happening at the national level.
That's really encouraging.
It is, yeah.
It shows that even in a world that feels so fragmented, there's still room for progress and positive change. Absolutely.
But we've been talking about all these abstract concepts and political stuff.
Right.
I'm really curious to see how this patchwork recovery is actually playing out, in real life.
Yeah.
Like, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, that's a good point.
The report has some specific examples, right?
It does. Yeah, it offers some really fascinating case studies
Okay.
that really bring all these economic trends to life.
Okay.
They show how people are adapting, how they're innovating,
Okay.
and how some people are even thriving
Wow.
in the face of all these challenges.
Okay, I'm ready for those examples. Let's dive into those.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
I'm eager to see how this patchwork recovery is actually playing out, beyond the headlines and the political debates.
Yeah. I think these examples, they offer a more nuanced perspective
Okay.
and a more human-centered perspective on the global economic landscape.
Go.
They show how people are figuring things out, how they're being creative, and how they're making things work even when things are tough.
Okay, let's start with Europe.
Okay.
I remember we were talking about their investments in clean technologies. Does the report have any specific examples of how that's actually happening?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
It talks about this small town in Germany that was, they were really dependent on coal mining for generations.
Okay.
And as the world is, shifting away from fossil fuels, this town was facing a major crisis.
Yeah.
Their main industry was in decline. Unemployment was rising. And, it was a really tough situation.
Yeah. So what do? Did they just give up?
No, they didn't.
Oh.
They really took a proactive approach.
Okay.
They realized they needed to adapt. And they made this really bold decision to completely reinvent themselves. And they invested a lot of money in wind and solar power.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And that actually attracted new businesses,
Okay.
in the renewable energy sector.
Okay.
And it created this whole new industry cluster in the town.
Wow, that's a huge turnaround.
It is, yeah.
But what about the coal miners who lost their jobs?
Right.
Were they just like left behind?
No, they weren't.
Oh.
The town leaders, they anticipated that this was going to be a problem.
Okay.
And they created a training program to help those former coal miners transition into these new green jobs.
Smart.
Yeah, they provided skills training in things like solar panel installation, wind turbine maintenance, energy efficiency auditing, things like that.
Wow, that's really impressive.
It is.
They turned what could have been like a real disaster into an opportunity for growth and renewal.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a real testament to their foresight and their commitment to supporting their community.
Yeah, that's a powerful example.
It is.
It really highlights how green technologies can not only help us address climate change, but also like revitalize local economies.
Right. It's a win-win.
Yeah, it really is. What about examples closer to home?
Okay.
We were talking about automation and how it's impacting jobs in the U.S. Does the report have any insights into how businesses are dealing with that?
It does. Yeah, it highlights this manufacturing company in the U.S. that was they were under pressure to automate their production. To stay competitive, and they knew they had to embrace automation. Right. But they also didn't want to lay off all their workers.
Yeah, of course not.
Right.
I mean, these are loyal people who've been with the company for a long time.
Exactly. So they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They needed to innovate, but they also wanted to take care of their employees.
Yeah, so what did they do?
Well, they came up with a pretty creative solution. Right. Instead of just, replacing all the workers with robots. They partnered with a local community college. Okay. And they created a robotics training program for their employees.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. So they basically invested in upskilling their workforce.
Right. So they're giving them the skills to actually operate the robots and maintain them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And this allowed them to automate their production line while still keeping their experienced workforce. And, it ended up creating a more engaged workforce, a workforce that was more adaptable.
Right, they're more prepared for the future.
Exactly. Better able to deal with the challenges of modern manufacturing.
That's a fantastic example.
It is, yeah.
Of how businesses can, approach this whole automation thing in a way that actually benefits both the company and the people who work there.
Right. It shows that it is possible to find that win-win scenario.
Yeah. Just take some planning and some investment.
Exactly. And I think it's a model that other businesses could learn from as automation keeps changing industries.
All over the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen examples from Europe, from the U.S.
Right.
What about other parts of the world? I know the report mentioned India as kind of a rising star in the tech sector.
It does.
Yeah. Does it have any specific examples from there?
It does. Yeah. It tells this really compelling story about this young entrepreneur in Bangalore who basically she saw this global shift towards remote work. And the increasing demand for tech talent. Right. And she started a company that develops AI-powered educational software.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And her company, it's doing really well.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, they employ hundreds of people. Right. And they're attracting investment from all over the world.
So she basically, she tapped into a global trend and she created a successful business that's creating jobs and helping your community.
Exactly.
That's a really great story. It really shows the power of entrepreneurship and innovation. Yeah. Even when the economy is uncertain, there's still opportunity out there.
Absolutely.
Man, these real world examples they're so inspiring.
They are, yeah.
They really give you a much needed dose of optimism,
Yeah, I agree.
They show that even in a world that's so fragmented and uncertain, there are still places where progress is happening,
Wow.
where people are finding ways to innovate.
Absolutely.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways for our listener?
Okay, well, I think one of the most important takeaways is that adaptability is really key. And in today's world, things are changing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
The people, the businesses, the communities that are willing to embrace change, to learn new things, to find creative solutions, those are the ones that are going to succeed.
It's like Darwin's theory of evolution, but for the economy.
Right.
It's like survival of the fittest, but in this case, fittest means like most adaptable.
Exactly.
Okay, so adaptability is key. What else?
I think another really important takeaway is the importance of collaboration.
Okay.
Whether it's businesses partnering with schools, or governments working with communities, or even just individuals helping each other out. We can do so much more when we work together.
Yeah. I mean, all those examples that we just talked about.
Right.
The Germantown, working together to switch to green energy. The U.S. manufacturing company.
Yeah.
Partnering with the community college.
Yeah.
Those partnerships were so important.
They were crucial to their success.
Yeah, and finally, I think these examples also remind us that even though there's all this uncertainty and all these challenges, there's still room for optimism.
Absolutely.
There are still opportunities to be found. There's still, new things to be invented.
Yeah.
And new communities to be built.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a message of hope and empowerment.
It is. So for our listener, you've been on this deep dive with us.
Yeah.
We hope that you've gained a more nuanced understanding of the global economy and a more hopeful one.
Yeah.
It's complex. It's always changing.
It is.
But it's also full of possibilities.
It is.
Yeah. It's been great exploring all these ideas with you.
Yeah. Same here. It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, we encourage you to stay curious, to stay engaged, and to keep exploring the world with an open mind. You never know what you might find.
That's right.
Exactly.
Deepdives.org hopes you found this conversation to be informative, enlightening, and most importantly, thought-provoking. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and follow us on streaming and social media platforms where available. Looking for unbiased news that considers all political perspectives? Check out our Simply News podcast for this news story on Facebook, YouTube, and other podcast platforms. Until next time, stay informed and be engaged.